When I opened my eyes, I was staring at a ceiling covered in gold leaf. Above me hung an enormous crystal chandelier. My head felt like it was splitting apart. It was the kind of pounding headache you'd expect after a terrible hangover. The strange part was that I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a drink or even where I had been the night before. I sat up and looked down at the incredibly heavy silk blankets covering me. Then I looked at my hands. They weren't mine. Where am I? The question echoed in my mind as I leaped out of bed. I hurried toward the enormous carved mirror. The face staring back at me wasn't mine. Standing before me was the reflection of an elegant, dark-haired Ottoman Sultana with striking features and a dramatic gaze. I had absolutely no memory of what had happened, how I had gotten here, or how I had somehow ended up inside this woman's body. My mind was completely blank. As I stared into the eyes of the stranger in the mirror, I started questioning my real life. I had a phone. I had a computer. I had university finals, deadlines, projects that still needed to be finished. How had I gone from my ordinary, comfortable modern life to this strange place that seemed frozen in another century? What kind of parallel universe had thrown me into these luxurious silk sheets? Nothing made sense. Maybe I was trapped inside some kind of simulation. Or maybe someone was playing an unbelievably elaborate prank on me. But the smell of the room, the cold air against my skin, and the undeniable reality of the reflection staring back at me, they erased every possibility that this was just a dream. Just then, the door suddenly flew open. A young man stormed into the room. He wore elegant Ottoman clothing and carried himself with authority, but at that moment he looked completely devastated. He dropped to his knees and clutched my hands tightly. "Mother," he cried. "How could they do this to you?" He looked as if he were on the verge of a complete breakdown. "I'm going to speak to His Majesty again. I refuse to stay silent in the face of this injustice. If I have to, I'll turn the Imperial Council upside down." My brain completely froze. Mother? Did this grown man just call me his mother? Was this some kind of joke? How old was he? How old was I? Not even the slightest maternal feeling existed inside me. I was seeing every single person here for the first time. Everything around me felt completely unfamiliar and overwhelmingly chaotic. Back in my own world, I could barely handle the responsibility of taking care of a cat. Now there was a fully grown son standing in front of me, looking into my eyes as if I were his only hope. Trying my best to hide my confusion, I asked, "What do you mean? What decision are you talking about?" His expression shattered. He stared at me as though I had just said something impossible. His lips trembled as he spoke the horrifying sentence. "His Majesty has made his final decision, Mother. You will be executed in 7 days. The sentence has already been passed." The moment I heard those words, it felt as though my brain had stopped working. This had to be a joke. I was a sultana. This grown man was my prince. And in 1 week, I was going to lose my head. Without knowing who was friend or enemy, I had to find a way to survive inside this unfamiliar body. I only had 7 days. The reality of my own execution hit me like a slap across the face. The biggest risk I'd ever faced in my previous life had been failing university exams. Now I was trapped in the middle of what felt like a deadly execution simulator, and judging by the look in the prince's eyes, his fate seemed tied to mine. If I died, the palace would devour him next. I had exactly 1 week to uncover the truth and save both of us. The attendants finally managed to calm the prince and escort him out of the room. As the prince left, another man appeared at the door. He wore the magnificent robes of a high-ranking Ottoman pasha. His posture radiated confidence. The moment he entered the room, he bowed respectfully. "My Sultana, are you all right?" His voice sounded genuinely concerned. "I will protect the prince. Please don't lose hope. We will prove your innocence before His Majesty. We will uncover this conspiracy. Do not give up." My inner voice immediately started talking. "Who is this guy? Seriously, who is he?" Then I heard the guards and attendants addressing him as Pasha. That eased my nerves a little. Apparently, he was one of the most powerful and influential men in the palace. I searched his eyes for even the slightest hint of deception. I found nothing. He looked completely sincere. Maybe he's the only person who can actually help us. Maybe he's the one who's going to solve all of this. At that moment, he looked like our savior. I slowly nodded. Without saying the words aloud, my eyes told him, I trust you. In the middle of all this chaos, his reassuring presence felt like the only thing keeping me from drowning. Once the Pasha stepped outside and began issuing commands, I realized I couldn't stay trapped inside those four walls any longer. I left my chamber and wandered through the palace's dark, endless corridors. The cold stone floor echoed beneath my feet. As I walked, I secretly observed everyone around me, the servants bowing respectfully, the attendants, and the silent guards standing watch. My thoughts wouldn't stop racing. That girl over there. She's definitely talking about me behind my back. I didn't miss the sly little sparkle in her eyes. She looked exactly like someone who spent all day spreading rumors. And those guards. They stood perfectly still like statues. But for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were simply waiting for the order to escort me to my execution. And look at those young palace ladies. They're already caught up in intrigues far beyond their years. Whispering, scheming, smiling to each other's faces while digging holes behind each other's backs. They reminded me of those social media accounts that thrive on exposing scandals and creating drama. The only difference. This wasn't entertainment. This was real. Which one had betrayed me? Which one had helped build the trap that was leading me to the executioner's sword? Everyone felt like a potential enemy. My mind kept inventing dangerous theories about every face I saw. The problem was, I didn't have a single clue. Not one piece of evidence. Walking through those corridors felt like crossing a minefield. I just didn't know which step would trigger the explosion. As I entered a magnificent corridor lined with towering marble columns, a woman appeared ahead of me. She was dressed in extravagant robes and carried herself with unmistakable arrogance. A smug smile spread across her face. She stopped directly in front of me. So, you couldn't escape this time. Her voice was soft, but every word dripped with poison. I won. You managed to fool His Majesty, and even the Valide Sultan for a while. But this is the end. No one will ever believe your lies again. In 7 days, your head will roll. The soul inside this body wasn't the timid woman she remembered. I wasn't the frightened Sultana who used to cry and hide. Her arrogant attitude hit a nerve that had survived from my modern life. I had never been the type to stay quiet when someone tried to intimidate me. I locked eyes with her. I didn't blink. Not even once. Then I answered in a voice so cold it surprised even me. I'm not one of the sultanas you're used to threatening, sweetheart. You'd better know your place. Otherwise, I'll bury you beneath these palace stones, and walk away as if nothing happened. She froze. She clearly hadn't expected me to answer like that. Her face turned pale. Her eyes widened in disbelief. For a moment, she couldn't even speak. Then she spun around in anger, gathered her attendants, and stormed away. I couldn't help smiling to myself. Score one for me. If you think you can beat me with arrogance, you've picked the wrong opponent. Moments later, the Valide Sultan's chief lady-in-waiting hurried toward me. She bowed gracefully. My Sultana, the Valide Sultan is waiting for you in her chambers, she said. Without another word, we began walking together. She spoke the entire way, trying to reassure me. Please don't worry, my Sultana. Do not lose heart. The Valide Sultan understands everything. No one knows the truth better than she does. She will resolve the tension between you. Rest assured. She has always stood on the side of justice. Her words sounded comforting. But after everything that had happened today, trusting anyone felt almost impossible. As she continued speaking, a sharp pain pierced my head. I instinctively grabbed my temple. The hallway around me blurred. The walls seemed to melt away. Then, a memory that didn't belong to me suddenly appeared. I found myself inside the Valide Sultan's private chamber. A luxurious feast had been prepared. Sitting across from me, was the same arrogant Sultana I had confronted only moments earlier. The Valide Sultan firmly took both of our hands and placed them together. "Enough," she said. "This hostility between the two of you must end. The peace of this palace depends on both of you." She was desperately trying to reconcile us. The memory vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. I blinked and found myself standing in front of the Valide Sultan's chamber. So, the hatred between me and that woman wasn't something recent. It went back much further. Far deeper than I had imagined. When the Valide Sultan welcomed me inside, her attitude was calm and respectful, yet noticeably reserved. I listened carefully to every word she said. But at the same time, another part of my mind studied every expression on her face. Every pause. Every glance. Every hidden intention. At this point, trusting anyone would have been a dangerous mistake. After leaving the Valide Sultan's chambers, I returned to the dim corridor. That's when I saw the Pasha again. He was waiting beneath the staircase leading to His Majesty's private quarters. The moment he noticed me, he quickly approached. He looked around to make sure no one was listening before lowering his voice. "My Sultana, the situation is even worse than we feared. This conspiracy runs much deeper than anyone imagined. The evidence presented to His Majesty isn't just a simple accusation. They've discovered documents bearing forged seals that appear to prove you've been secretly exchanging letters with ambassadors from our neighboring enemy state for months." He continued. "It gets even worse. Gold has been disappearing from the imperial treasury for months. Whoever planned this trap made it look as though every stolen coin was sent to that enemy kingdom under your direct orders." I felt my heartbeat growing faster. Then he revealed the final accusation. "According to those letters, you supposedly formed an alliance with that kingdom to assassinate every other prince in the palace, so that your own son could become the sole heir to the throne. When His Majesty saw evidence suggesting that someone had plotted against his sons and emptied the imperial treasury, he was consumed by rage. To make matters worse, the seals on those documents perfectly match the impression made by your own royal signet ring." The Pasha spoke as though I already knew everything. As though I had truly lived through all of this. I struggled to keep my face calm. Inside, I was completely stunned. Whoever had orchestrated this conspiracy was a genius. Everything had been planned with terrifying precision. Every piece of evidence pointed directly at me. To an outsider, the accusations would seem impossible to doubt. Back in my old life, the worst thing I ever worried about was getting caught copying homework. Now, I stood accused of treason, conspiracy, and attempting to seize the throne. If I couldn't uncover the truth, my life would end in exactly 7 days. I looked at him anxiously. "Then what do we do? Is there any way to save ourselves?" The Pasha took a slow breath and looked directly into my eyes. "We can't expose this conspiracy unless we uncover the people inside the palace who helped create it. I must prove those documents are forged. I must discover where the stolen gold was really sent. And I need full authority over the palace guards. To save both you and the prince, I need your royal signet ring. Give me the seal. Tonight I'll infiltrate the conspirators' hideout, recover the original documents, and prove that every one of those seals is fake." At that moment, the Pasha looked like my only remaining hope. I slowly removed the heavy royal signet ring bearing my family's crest. Then I placed it in his hand. "I'm trusting you, Pasha," I said. "My life, and the prince's life, are in your hands. Please don't disappoint me." The Pasha accepted the ring with both hands. He bowed respectfully. Then he turned around and disappeared into the dark palace corridor. I watched him until he was completely out of sight. For some reason, a strange feeling settled in my chest. One I couldn't explain. Hours passed. Darkness swallowed the palace. The full moon rose silently above the rooftops. Time kept slipping away like sand through an hourglass. I could feel every passing second bringing me closer to my execution. Sitting alone inside my room became unbearable. The walls felt as though they were slowly closing in around me. I decided there was only one thing left to do. I would speak to His Majesty myself. I would look him in the eye. I would expose this ridiculous conspiracy and clear my name. With that determination, I headed straight for his private chambers. But the moment I arrived, the enormous guards and palace executioners standing outside stepped in front of me, crossing their spears to block my path. "It is His Majesty's direct order, my Sultana," one of them said firmly. "Until the execution is carried out, His Majesty will not receive anyone." No matter what I said, no matter how desperately I argued, they refused to let me inside. The doors remained shut. Frustrated and completely helpless, I turned away. Just then, one of the younger maids carefully approached me. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "My Sultana, this part of the palace is dangerous. The guards are watching your every move. We can leave through the rear gate and walk into the Imperial Garden. Perhaps you'll be able to clear your mind. And if we're fortunate, we might come across a royal messenger arriving from outside the palace. Maybe we'll finally discover a clue." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than sitting in my room waiting to die. So I silently followed her into the cool night air. We quietly made our way through the towering trees and thick hedges. Then, I heard voices. Soft, careful, secretive. They were coming from the large pavilion ahead. Instinctively, I crouched behind a row of bushes and slowly peeked through the leaves. The moment I saw who was standing there, it felt as though ice water had been poured straight into my veins. I couldn't believe my eyes. The Pasha was there. Standing directly across from him was the arrogant Sultana who had threatened me earlier that day. Several other palace women stood beside her. They were all gathered together. The Pasha calmly reached into his robe. He pulled out the royal signet ring. The very ring I had entrusted to him only hours before. The symbol of my authority. The one he had sworn to use to save me. Under the pale moonlight, he smiled. Not the warm smile of an ally, but the cold smile of a traitor. Then, he placed the ring into my greatest enemy's hand. She looked down at it and smiled with satisfaction. The others began laughing quietly among themselves. At that moment, everything became clear. The conspiracy was far greater than I had ever imagined. The person I had trusted the most had been my greatest enemy all along, and with my own hands, I had delivered the final weapon that would seal my fate. I remained frozen behind the bushes. For several long seconds, I couldn't even breathe. No phone. No internet. No one I could trust. I found myself longing for the simple, comfortable life I had once taken for granted. Standing alone in that dark garden, it felt as though everything was over. But then, something inside me changed. The fear that had gripped my heart slowly gave way to something stronger. Determination. If I wanted to survive, if I wanted to expose every traitor hiding within these palace walls, I would have to do it alone. The game had only just begun, and this time, I wasn't going to lose.